Hello, welcome to another episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today I'm with Alexey Karapetov. Did I say that right?
Almost.
Maybe I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself. But you're the creator, maintainer, guru, overall god over Cider, right? Which is a tool to help keep a changelog for your projects.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, Cider is a very simple tool that I made for myself when I started doing Dart packages. Well, probably I should speak a bit about my experience and my background.
Well, it's also good to talk about Dart packages. Wait a minute, this is Flying High with Flutter, right? I mean, you're doing Dart only things?
Yeah. So I am not your typical Flutter developer, and in fact, I almost have no experience with the mobile apps at all whatsoever. So Dart was a language suggested by one of my friends just to try it out because at that time he looked at it and he thought it's a nice language. So again, going back to my background, I've been in software development for like 20 years now, and the beginning of my career and basically how that kind of big world of software development started for me was from PHP. And Alan, I think I've seen somewhere that you also have some experience writing in that language. And to well, to put it in a soft language, PHP is probably not the best programming language to start with. To learn how to program with, and so I've been doing a lot of software development for fun, just for myself as a kind of meditation, I can say. And yeah, it happened that in the beginning of my journey, I used PHP a lot and mostly PHP. And obviously it had its drawbacks. So I think like 3 or maybe 4 years ago, a friend of mine suggested trying Dart. At that point, I think Dart 2 was announced, if I'm not mistaken. So I tried it and I liked the language because it gave me all the ecosystem, all the tools that I would need to start right ahead, right? Yeah, I think that this is still not the very common feature of a language, that it would give you, say, the packaging system out of the box, right? Together with the package repository. So these nice features of Dart were pretty appealing to me. So I started writing at it, and at that point I was like one of my largest, again, for fun projects was a library for JSON API. So JSON API is basically a standard for client server interaction in JSON. And I used that format before. And again, with PHP, I wasn't able to find a good implementation. I wrote one myself and I was supporting it. It was getting some use from other folks on the internet. So I decided to re-implement JSON API models, first of all, in Dart, because it obviously Dart at that point offered much more pleasant support for like modeling things, like being strictly typed and easy to understand. That was a good choice for such kind of thing. So when I started writing that package, again, speaking of Dart's ecosystem, one of the things that Dart package and a tooling mandates is changelog, and it's been like that at least from the very beginning, from from my beginning with Dart for at least like 3 years, I guess. So again, being familiar with the open sourcing in general, at that point I'd been using changelog in the format suggested by the site named keepatchangelog.com, and that was the only format that I was familiar with. I mean, obviously you can write changelog in any way you want, but that keepatchangelog suggested a standard, and I like following the standards. It's better when you know what you want to do. It's better when the task is kind of clearly defined before you start doing that. So one of the features of the keep a changelog format was the links to the diffs. So like if we look at the keep a changelog standard, so when every release has its version, and the version is like the version has the link to the source control side, whatever GitHub, whatever you're using. Like that link is basically the diff link between this version and the previous version. So when you click on the link, you can see in the code what's added or removed in this particular version. And when you have several versions of your package, it becomes kind of tedious to do all the links yourself manually, right? So I tried finding a tool for that would support changelog and would be able to add those diff links for me automatically, but I failed. I think at that point there were no tools like that. So naturally, I decided to write one myself. Interestingly, to do that, I had to fulfill a few more artificial needs. I had to parse the changelog, and I had to render it back in Markdown. Obviously, there were no packages, no libraries for parsing changelog, for working with it, and for Markdown rendering. So besides Cider, which is the topic for today, I also have two packages. One is named Change, and that is essentially a model that supports the keep a changelog format that would give you a nice breakdown of the releases you have. It would sort the releases by the versions. It would be able to, like, you would be able to traverse the changelog to see the versions themselves, the links, the changes that basically are included in a release. Again, the changes are broken into different types specified by keep a changelog. So that is, if you work with the changelog in the keep a changelog format, that might be something that you might be interested in. And the other thing is Markdown. So Markdown, as it's implemented in the Dart packages, goes kind of the opposite way. The Markdown package, like the one that's the most popular on pub.dev, does the opposite thing. It can read Markdown. It parses it into HTML DOM. But the other way around, there were no libraries to do that. So I had to implement my own, since the changelog, if you want to change the changelog, you have to render the Markdown back. So basically, that's the essence of the Cider package. It allows you to automatically do those links and bump the version in the pubspec.
That's quite interesting. I mean, was it? I still didn't quite understand like why spend all the effort to create a tool like this. There must be other languages and things like that that can create this kind of tool that maybe are agnostic, right? Um, you know, why did you decide to create this in Dart and not just rely upon others?
Very good question, and I don't have the answer for it. Uh, I, as I said, the reason I make packages is just for fun, as a way of a meditation, basically. So there was no reason for that apart from just trying out a new nice language and building something that might be used by someone else. When, at least in my experience, when I was like young and aspiring software engineer, when I would look at some well-established framework or a tool that I would use, I always wanted to build something like that myself, and to be that guy who say invented or created that cool framework. Uh, Apparently, building a framework is not easy, so I was not very successful in that, but I was able to build a few nice small tools that some of them seem to be usable and useful. So I'm glad I have that. So yeah, answering your question, no particular reason apart from just having fun.
Okay, yeah, and I was kind of going through the package. First of all, let's talk about the name Cider, right? And that doesn't immediately come to my mind that this would be for helping developers to keep a changelog. I do see that it is an acronym. Now, did the name come first, or the acronym came first?
I was thinking about the name for something that does CI/CD, and it was hard to come up with something interesting. Cider was the first thing that I thought of. So yeah, Cider it be. And the logo, that picture that you see on Dart on pub.dev, is done by my daughter. So that's just a nice name. I needed something that starts with CI and has the CD in the name. So just that.
Okay. Obviously, we're looking at the logo. You have the name Cider. You have an apple, which I guess is related to apple cider. But then there's a bunch of gears. Is that just trying to relate to engineering, or is there anything else besides the gears that has a meaning?
Yeah, this is supposed to be like to mean tooling, or like hey, this is a tool.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the other thing that comes to mind is going through um, the like how to use it. I did notice that it does look for a pub. The pubspec.yaml?
Yeah, so it's a CLI application. You install it through the regular pub global activate, and it provides just one binary named Cider. So before we talk about the usage, we probably should say a few words about the configuration. The configuration is not too complex. So what you want to configure, again, this is all comes from the fact that it's using the keep a changelog as a format that has the links to the diffs. And to configure, for Cider to be able to build you the diff link, it needs to know the link template. So the link template is the main configuration setting that you have. The configuration for Cider is stored in the pubspec itself. I am not sure if that's the recommended way for a package tool to store the configuration in pubspec, but neither found any recommendations against it. So I think that's what it is. Uh, so you would configure the diff link, and obviously if you're just starting a new package, for the very first version there would be no diff link, as there is nothing to compare with, you would use another template that's called tag. And again, according to keep a changelog format, the very first version also has a link. But that link is special. It's not a diff. It's just a link to the particular tag. One of the things that keep a changelog kind of implies is that every version, every release that you have must have a corresponding tag in your in Git or whatever system you're using. So yeah, these two things are the configuration. Now, the binary is supposed to be run from either the project root or any folder within the project root. So basically, when you're working with a package, your console is usually at the project root or sometimes in one of the subfolders. And this is where you can run Cider from. If it's run from the regardless of where it's called from, it would try to find the pubspec.yaml, starting from the current directory and going up the file system tree until it finds the pubspec.yaml, which and the directory where it finds it will consider it the project root. There are two kind of major tasks that Cider does. One is it allows to add a new line to the changelog from the command line. This is probably, again, an artificial need. It's usually easy to add one yourself. There's nothing special in editing a markdown file in your IDE. But on the other hand, if you're, say, again, let's look at how keep a changelog is organized. Every release version must be, I think, header 2, like header level 2 of Markdown. And under each release, you are supposed to have the sections, which break the changes down to the specific types of the changes, which can be like added feature, a fixed bug, a removed feature, a change, and probably something else. Like security change. So these type headers, the ones that separate the changes into the blocks of the specific type, those have to be, as far as I remember, an H3. So basically what I'm getting to is it is relatively easy to screw up the formatting, and it will not be exactly the changelog form, the keep a changelog format. Not a big deal, again. But if you have to read that changelog back programmatically, it's better to keep the format consistent. And we do need to keep it back, to read it back, because when you, so first thing is you can add the changes from the command line, right? The keep a changelog format suggests that if you're working on a new version, all the changes that are being added go to the special section on top of the changelog, which is called unreleased. And when the release happens, you replace that unreleased header with the released version and the link to the diff and the date of the release. So when you have those changes added to the unreleased section, the next step is to bump the project version and convert the unreleased section into the real release, right? To do that, if you already have some versions published before, you would need to know how to build the diff link, because you need to know the previous version to build the diff from. And again, it's not very hard to do manually, but Cider would do that for you. And like, to be honest, that was the main reason I built it, because it was kind of tedious to build those diff links myself. So in order to know the previous version, Cider needs to parse the changelog back, read all the existing versions, sort them, and then find the one that precedes the new version. And one of the features that I don't think it's announced on the in the README, Cider supports having multiple major versions simultaneously. So say you can work on version 2 and version 3, and if you release say 3.1.2, it will be smart enough to figure out that the previous version for the 3.1.2 should start with 3. It should also be the the major version of 3 and not major version of 2. So yeah, two main things: adding changes, bumping the project version, and then making the release. Speaking of bumping the version, again, it's not too hard to open the pubspec.yaml, look at your current version, figure out which digit to increment. But Cider can help you there. Like usually the changes can be divided into three main types. If you have a BC breaking change that breaks the backward compatibility, that is usually the bump of the major version. And if the major version is 0, as far as I'm not mistaken, you should bump the minor version according to what's it called, to the semantic versioning, right? So Cider can do that for you. You can just say Cider bump breaking, and it will increment the whatever number needs to be incremented, and it will set the rest of the version to zeros. Like say if you have version 2.1.2 and you're releasing a new BC breaking version, it will increment it to 3.0.0. So the major version would get incremented from 2 to 3, and the rest of the numbers will be set to 0 automatically. The next category of changes would be the adding new features, and that usually goes as a new minor version. Again, Cider can do that for you. You just do Cider bump minor, and it will increment the minor version. The same goes for patch, and relatively like not too long ago, I have added support for for the builds and the pre-release part of the version. So you can say bump the minor version and the build version as well. So it supports. I understand that the real Flutter devs, they usually support like this sophisticated versioning. They need the sophisticated versioning with builds and pre-releases carefully crafted. So Cider does that as well. That's basically it. That's what we have: adding changes, bumping versions, and doing the release, which basically updates the change log and converts the unreleased section to a regular release.
Okay, that's pretty powerful. Now, I mean, the reason I brought up about the pubspec, right, is because I can imagine wanting to use this kind of tool in other projects that are maybe not Dart, right? Is this actually able to be done, or like maybe some features I can use, some I cannot?
This is a good question. So Cider is built specifically for Dart, and it reads the current version from the pubspec. It does not understand any other source of the version. So as it is now, no, it's not a universal tool. It's Dart specific, but it's kind of easy to make a universal one. Again, Cider itself does not carry much of that parsing rendering logic. The changelog is manipulated through the change package, which is universal as far as as long as you follow the keep a changelog format. So yeah, that can be done, but not with Cider as it is.
Now, is there plans to actually do that? I mean, you are a Dart developer. I thought that would make you more kind of open to kind of being more agnostic, right? Rather than sticking only with Dart.
It may make sense to build a universal tool for the changelog. I have not thought about that yet, but yeah, probably we first would need to look at the existing tools for that. And to be honest, the whole idea of programmatic manipulation with the changelog is a bit unusual, artificial, right? It automates a relatively simple task, which probably people can do themselves. But yeah, it's a good question. I have not thought about that yet. Maybe we should do that.
Okay. I mean, how long has this kind of tool been out for in terms of like really being usable? And what has been the community response?
It's been there for about 3 years, I believe. It was one of the first things that I built, I think. Let me see. That's a good question. 2 years. A little bit over 2 years at this point. I do want to support it, to continue supporting it. I recently refactored it. So my original intention was to make it kind of extensible with plugins. So my first attempt to implement those kind of plugin support was made with dependency injection slash service locator pattern, which I don't really like. So I refactored it recently again, just for the sake of writing some code and trying to make it as nice as possible. I still don't think it's extensible, but for me, considering my work with Cider, I think that would be the top priority for now, to bring this support for pluggable extensions to it. And I hope that will allow the users to use it more in a more flexible way.
I mean, what kind of extensions would people actually be able to do to this tool? Would it be maybe the changing the format of the changelog, or we kind of talked a little bit about extending that to more languages? Like, what kind of extensions are you looking for people to hook into?
Yeah, one of the feature requests that I seen recently was about supporting what's the name for that? So it's like conventional commit messages or something like that. So basically, when you commit a new change, you in the commit message you specify the type of the change, whether it's a break-in change, a new feature, or a fix, and then whatever build tool you have would analyze your commit logs and convert into the change log. So that functionality can easily be implemented as a plugin, I think, and that would be a perfect candidate for that. Again, the idea, the spirit of the keep a changelog format, which I started from, was to not blindly convert the Git log messages into the changelog. The changelog is supposed to be more like manually crafted and written by people for people. So I'm not sure if that's something that would be a really valuable feature. But as a candidate for a plugin, yeah, that would be probably a good one to try.
Yeah, I'm also thinking it would be nice to have something maybe that would generate different types of mediums, maybe Mobi or PDF or I don't know, who knows, right? I can imagine people wanting the changelog and something else. But I guess since you're doing changelog with Markdown, basically you could just take the Markdown file, right? And then just kick that into something else.
Yeah, and actually, like if when you do a release, when you convert the unreleased section into a full-fledged release with its version, Cider would print out the markdown contents of that particular block, that particular release, and some people use it to. Uh, so on GitHub, when you do a release, when you tag a new release, it allows you to add a markdown description that would be shown in the releases pages on your project. So some people use that exactly for that purpose. So when you cut a new release, it would automatically put that description on GitHub. That's usable. But again, the changelog parsing and rendering is not kind of Cider specific. It's not Cider. It's these two packages which can pretty much be used on their own. They don't have any dependencies. Like they don't depend on Dart.io. They just very simple rendering parsing. Just working with strings basically, nothing else.
Okay, and that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think overall it is a pretty nice tool. I like the pretty easy to install. You don't need to actually like kind of add it necessarily to your project and then run pub install. It's just kind of a global install. So it's quite nice. The way to use it is pretty straightforward, I think, too, with kind of adding things and then you can cut a release and it can definitely automate quite a bit. I mean, you do use the word CI, right? But I mean, adding commit message in CI wouldn't necessarily, like, adding those changes in a CI wouldn't really make sense. But cutting the release using that tool would make sense, right?
Yeah, this is a release automation thing. It's when say when you know that you're ready. Ideally, how it's supposed to work is it would be part of say I'm using GitHub. I'm using GitHub Actions, right? And when you are ready to make a new release, the only thing that you would do is to just create a new tag, and then the action handler can use Cider to get that tag, convert it to the release, to bump the version in the pubspec, to update the changelog, and do all that things basically. So the big idea of Cider was to automate this process. If you have a bunch of packages and you release them on the regular cadence, and as I understand nowadays, people tend to release as fast as possible, like as soon as possible. Once you have a change, you basically do a new release. You don't wait for a bunch of them to accumulate before releasing things, at least for like small projects like Cider itself. That's what I do. So if you release often, working with changelog and doing these updates can be a bit boring. So Cider is designed to automate this part of the work. It's a release tool, one of the release tools that you would use. Interestingly enough, I mean, it seems to be helpful to other folks. I think this is the second most popular package of the ones that I support. The most popular is JSON Path, but JSON Path it's at 99% popularity right now. But this is not its kind of natural popularity. It's because JSON Path is used by Flutter Flow as part of their application built-in tool, and it's baked in the applications that you build with Flutter Flow. Cider, on the other hand, does not have other reason to like to have this popularity numbers apart from being actually useful. So I hope it will continue to be useful, and I intend to work on it more.
Okay, that kind of brings me to my next question. Like, what is the upcoming features that you want to be adding into into this? Because I mean, at a general like look, it's like, okay, can you add those changes? Can you add specific types of changes? Can you cut releases? Like, what else is kind of on the horizon for this tool?
My first attempt to make it pluggable failed miserably, so I want to try again and figure out something more usable and hopefully easier to understand. One of the things that I don't kind of I can't yet put my finger on exactly is the how you build a good architected a well architected CLI tool. Like where does the separation of concerns lie? Where how do you make it testable and extensible in terms of like, okay, I want to add a new feature, and that means I need to add a new command. And what would be a good example of a good CLI application with a good architecture? Cider is currently built with it's using args under the hood. Args is a great package, is a great library, but one thing I don't exactly like about it is the commands and the command runner both are stateful, and I wish there was a more kind of stateless, immutable-ish oriented framework for building CLI applications. So this is one thing that bothers me a bit. So I might want to venture into reinventing the wheel and building a CLI framework, CLI application framework of some sort. But that's a big thing. That's a big task. So yeah, that would be probably the most interesting things for me at this point.
Okay, yeah. I don't think I have no questions about specifically about Cider because I think it seems pretty clear overall. Is there anything else about Cider that you want people to know about that we didn't get a chance to cover?
I would appreciate feedback about it, and I would like to know what's missing, like where the pain points are for the ones who may want to extend it. Who say if you have a particular feature in mind and you want Cider to support it, what keeps you back from implementing it on your own? So my intention is to build it as flexible as possible, to make Cider as flexible as possible. So I would appreciate this kind of feedback. That's talking about Cider. Other than that, there is another package that I would like people to know about. That's the JSON Path library. Again, it's one of the projects I did for fun just because Dart did not have any JSON Path support at that point. I think I started about a year and a half ago. It's being used by but mostly by folks in Flutter Flow, so that what gives it this crazy popularity numbers. I don't think it's getting much kind of naturally acquired attention. Again, would appreciate feedback about that library as well. As someone who does open sourcing just as a relaxation, I focus on the code quality and the internal design of the app. So I would really appreciate feedback there. It's this constant search for the ideal, the perfect implementation of a feature of an idea. So I would love to discuss these things with anyone.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I think we all would like to have some feedback because you're kind of coding and people using it, but you're not really sure if you've coded something the best way or the most suitable way, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of software nowadays, and it's hard to get it criticized, to get feedback about the implementation itself. yeah, the features are obvious. You can judge a package by looking at what it provides, at what it gives. But for me, as this kind of leisure time developer, I find the beauty of the coding inside the code itself, not that much in the features, not that much in the API it provides, but in the implementation itself. So I would be happy to chat about that.
Okay, that's good. I think it's a admirable thing to look for from the audience to see if somebody can check out the package and give some thoughts. I know Dart.dev has a lot of kind of tips and guidelines about what they consider to be kind of the proper way to do Dart. If you've ever gone through that before.
Yeah, that's another really good feature of Dart as an ecosystem is the pub points that it assigns to the package and the pretty strict guidelines. The built-in formatting for the code. I really appreciate how the developers thought about these controversial things and provided the tools for for formatting, for the changelog, for package quality assurance up front.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any other questions on my side. But in terms of this project, but I have one question as somebody who's doing mostly Dart. I don't know if you've listened to some of the other previous episodes. My kind of not. Mm, one of the things I've been thinking about is I don't know if I can say it's a criticism necessarily, but more of an observation and a curiosity if this is the right thing to do or not. Pretty much, if you're writing Flutter, you're definitely doing Dart. If you're doing Dart, you may not actually be doing Flutter, but mostly about 99% of the time, I guess at this point, that is true, right?
Sure.
And I have stated my criticism about not being on board where Dart and Flutter release at the same time with their new releases, but that's kind of the path that they've chosen. Do you have any thoughts on that? Where kind of like Dart and Flutter, when they both have a big release, they will release at the same time? Do you think that's the right thing to do, or do you think that it doesn't really matter? Do you have any thoughts on that?
As someone who doesn't do Flutter, it's hard for me to judge whether that a good thing or not. My understanding that the initial intention for Dart, well, maybe not the initial. I'm not talking about the times where it was supposed to be a replacement for JavaScript. It's more about like the Dart 2 part of its history. At some point, it was positioned as general purpose language. I think they recently changed the description into, was it client oriented language or something? So for me, like my background is mostly backend development, like backend distributed system, this kind of stuff. And I, as this for fun software engineer, I appreciate that Dart is sort of independent from Flutter. So I understand your frustration with features of the language not being used in the framework, maybe, or like discrepancies between the architectures here and there. But I appreciate that Dart seems to be relatively independent at this point. So see, I'm uh, as much as I feel your pain, for me personally, I find it a good thing.
You find it good that they're bundled together, that they get released about the same time, basically. Not even about, they are released at the same time.
I don't really like care if they're released at the same time. I see the evolution of Dart as a language, and I like it. Do you see that the dependency between Dart releases, or like major Dart releases, and Flutter releases? I'm I'm probably not have the I don't have the whole picture, not enough context to judge.
Yeah, I also don't really have any like serious things to point out. My concern is just that I would like to keep Dart as its own thing. Of course, when you install Flutter, obviously you need Dart. I like that they kind of come together when you go to install Flutter, but kind of coupling them in the same release time makes me worry that you have kind of this kind of Ruby on Rails issue. Do you know what I mean by that?
No. Can you expand on that?
So I did Ruby on Rails for many, many years. And of course, obviously, if you do Ruby, it doesn't mean, sorry, if you, of course, you do Rails, you're going to do Ruby, but still, like, how do I say? They always had the stigma that if you weren't doing Rails or something with those kind of famous Ruby frameworks, then you wouldn't really ever be touching Ruby to begin with. Of course, there's other projects like Puppet and other things like that that are also using Ruby. But my concern is that, I would like to keep the language strong as possible and to kind of like make sure that we're not saying, okay, I would only use Dart if we're doing Flutter. Like Dart really is a language that people would consider for other things, right? If you bundle it, if you bundle it together,
Sure.
yeah, that's my big concern is that we're not going to have it that okay, Dart is only used for Flutter, right? And so if you start to always kind of release them together, you may get perception, and you may also like give people the feeling that maybe Dart is not strong enough to be on its own.
It used to be that the Dart that it was able to download and install Dart separately. I am not sure how things are.
I believe it's still done that way.
So if you go to the Dart dev, the get Dart page still allows you to use the language standalone. It's bundled with Flutter, but even if it's bundled, I think it shouldn't be too hard to install whatever version of Dart, whatever flavor of it, and use it with Flutter. In bundling Dart together with Flutter, I don't see a big issue. It seems to be a natural, like a good choice. Like if you're downloading the framework, why would you download it without the language? The language is just bundled with it. So
well, I mean, bundling it together with the framework is not a problem for me. I think that's totally fine, and that's actually good, and I promote that part. But just releasing new versions of Dart alongside the same exact time you're releasing new versions of Flutter, there's two concerns that pop in my mind. One is that you're going to have this perception that, as I said before, oh, Dart's not a language you can use by itself because, I mean, look at this. They're tightly coupled with Flutter. Even though, of course, you can use it separately. You and I both know that. I don't know what other people think, right? If you always see both of these things come out at the same time, you may have that opinion. Now, the other thing, too, is I forgot my other thing I had in my head. I had one more thing in my head about this bundling issue. But I think the perception is could be something more powerful than maybe other people may think it is. Perception's huge, right? If you go to a website and it looks like crap, even though it may be the best website for you to use for whatever that purpose is, if it looks like crap, you're going to have a perception that the website's not going to be useful or good enough. So it has to have a strong UI, strong UX, blah blah blah. But if your perception is not there, then you're going to have a hard time to believe it.
I might be a bit out of context here. Has it been a thing for a while now that they release both Dart and Flutter at the same time?
Yeah, it's been for the last couple of releases. They've been doing this on time, and I think and I don't know. I have concerns.
And you're sure this is not a coincidence?
No, it's not a coincidence. I'm surprised you think it's a coincidence, but I actually talked to a couple of people about this on the podcast before.
No. Full disclosure,
you have no idea, right?
As I said, I'm no Flutter dev.
Yeah, I think maybe because it's the strongest framework we have in Dart language itself, using Dart, that I guess it makes sense. And you don't want to be able to be running Flutter, and then all of a sudden the Dart version you have globally, which may be different, is different, then you may have some compatibility issues. So maybe they're trying to do it like that.
Oh, I see where you're going. Yeah, I think that's a valid concern.
Yeah, that may be why they do it. But I do know that they do release them at the same time, and it is intentional.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Dart itself still seems to be being kind of promoted as a general purpose language. They're still saying it's you can compile stuff like natively on different architectures, and it's supposed to be used as a backend for your mobile app. So I hope this entanglement between the language and the framework will not let the multi-purposeness of the language go away.
Yeah.
Because it's a nice language, and it's really sad that we don't yet have say support for like major databases apart from Postgres. Like, but it's getting there. I think I would love to work on a backend project using Dart. I think it's a nice language. In my personal rating, it's second to Kotlin. Kotlin is the best.
Kotlin is the best.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
To me, it's not that I worked with a lot of languages, but from what I worked with, Kotlin seems to be the most pleasant one to work. Like it's as a language. I'm not talking about the Java whole world, right? It's just the language itself.
Now, why would you choose Kotlin as what you're saying, kind of the best language that you've used?
Well, it's super concise. It supports immutability out of the box. It supports function currying and all these nice things. Like writing DSLs in Kotlin is a blessing. It's so nice, so cool. Yeah. So Kotlin to me is and I'm glad to see Dart acquiring some features close to what Kotlin offers.
Yeah, like the question mark at the end. I forgot what it's called. The null safety. Sorry, the null safety.
Yeah, the null safety. Yeah, yeah. The pattern matching is nice. I wish Dart had immutability. I wish the like lists and maps were not built as they are built right now. It would be really nice to have that separation between like say a list view interface or map view interface, and then a mutable map and mutable list. That would be really nice. Like Kotlin did it the right way. Probably that would be featuring Dart 4.
No, well, we'll see. I think they're going. I think I see languages going more and more functional nowadays. So I wouldn't put it past it. Dart. It probably would be a Dart 4 kind of thing because at least I'm talking about immutability because that's a really big change. And still, a lot of developers don't really know how that works. And I mean, with packages like Freeze, obviously it makes it easier, but it does take quite a bit of time to get up to it, and people don't really understand it at first. So it takes time.
Yeah, but there you have to have that build system that would like all that code generation overhead and stuff like that. So again, maybe for the client side development, maybe immutability is not that big of a thing. Uh, maybe the like working with the scaffolding and all these kind of things is easier and kind of feels more natural with the mutable things. I'm not sure about that, so I won't judge.
Okay.
But it would be nice to have support for immutables. There is a package with immutable structures, like built from ground up. I think,
Yeah, there is.
like the Scala way. And as far as I remember, they claim it to be quite fast, quite performant. So probably I should just try that. But again, that would be another dependency.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we definitely reached the end of our time, and I just want to thank you for coming on and talking about Cider. I like the tool. I I am pretty inspired to maybe start to use that because quite a few times I release things and I have to explain to people what the what the difference was, and so it probably would be better if I did something like this rather than, not doing this, right?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a great experience. And yeah, I wish you good luck with the podcast. I watched a few episodes. I liked it. So we'll continue watching. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad I got one more audience member.
Oh,
So
sure. You've earned at least one subscriber.
Great. You did subscribe, right?
I did.
Should be like, subscribe, share, right?
Sure. Yeah, that mantra.
All right. Well, again, thank you for coming on. Maybe we'll have you back on again in the future.
Thank you.